Hello, I'm Pastor Nanette Christofferson, and along with Pastor Steve Talmadge, we offer these short Bible studies on our lectionary readings. This week, we find ourselves in the 19th week after Pentecost, and our Old Testament reading is Genesis 32, 22 to 31. Our commentary is by Amy Merrill Willis of 2014. So let's take a little look at some background information concerning Jacob and Esau. Jacob and Esau's parents are Isaac and Rebekah. Rebekah becomes pregnant with twins, and she hears from God that the second child, the second one, will become the first child, meaning that the second one is to receive the blessing that the first child would receive. Birth order was very important in those days, and so Esau had a right to the blessing, but trickster Jacob and Rebekah managed to take that away from him. Once that birthright is stolen, Jacob flees, and he goes to Rebekah's brother's place, Laban. And there he works for Laban for many years. He marries Leah and he marries Rebekah. He marries Rachel, not Rebekah. And in that process, he has acquired quite a bit of wealth. During that time now, he feels like it is time for him to go back home. And he's been living there for over 20 years. He has not seen his brother and doesn't know much about his brother. And so he is feeling really nervous and wondering what it will be like when he goes to meet his brother. Where we meet up in Scripture today is where Jacob is spending the night at the fork of the Jabbok River, where it meets the Jordan River. And he's getting ready to separate his family from himself so that if Esau decides to attack him or retaliate against him, he's not retaliating against his family. It's just he's retaliating against Jacob. So let's read the Scripture and take a look at it. The same night he got up and took his 2 wives, his 2 maids, and his 11 children, and crossed the ford of the Jabbok. He took them and sent them across the stream, and likewise everything that he had. Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until daybreak. When the man saw that he did not prevail against Jacob, he struck him on the hip socket, and Jacob's hip was put out of joint as he wrestled with him. Then he said, "Let me go, for the day is breaking." But Jacob said, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." So he said to him, "What is your name?" And he said, "Jacob." Then the man said, "You shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God and with humans, and have prevailed." Then Jacob asked him, "Please tell me your name." But he said, "Why is it that you ask my name?" And there he blessed him. So Jacob called the place Peniel, saying, "For I have seen God face to face, and yet my life is preserved." The sun rose up upon him as he passed Peniel, limping because of his hip. Now, if you were to stop right now and put this video on hold and take out a piece of paper and write down your top 10 Bible stories, the top 10 that you think of maybe the most, or when you think of biblical stories that have really resonated in your heart, and wrote them down, would this Genesis 32, 22 to 31 be one of them? For me, that's a resounding yes. I love this scripture. And some people might ask, well, why is this scripture reading so important? And it's important to our Jewish brothers and sisters as well, but it's important to me because it's so real life. We are oftentimes find ourselves wrestling with God. And the big significance of this, to me, is it shows the character of God and how our Creator does not give up on us, even if we are an unsavory character like Jacob. So if we look back at Scripture from Genesis 25 to 31, we easily see how Jacob was a con, a cheat, how he deceived and manipulated virtually every member of his family, and then he ran off when the going got tough. It's hard for us to like Jacob, as he seems to get away with this bad behavior, and he is also able to gain promises in the process. This fact alone often gives the reader a little bit of uncertainty about Jacob. Amy Merrill Willis, in her 2014 commentary, makes the following comments. Very often, stories of journeys, biblical or otherwise, are also stories about character transformation. The story in Genesis 32 finds Jacob homeward bound, after 20 years away, with his past threatening to catch up with him. Faced with the prospect of meeting up with Esau, who may yet wish revenge, Jacob finds himself at a turning point. He can face up to what waits for him, or he can do what he has done in the past, turn tail, and run. As this passage opens, Jacob seems to be finding a way to protect what is his in the face of Esau's wrath. His trickster mind engaged, Jacob has divided up his family and servants into 2 separate camps and has sent them away across the Jabbok River, leaving him alone. This is a rare event. Now, as Jacob wrestles with God, is it a test of character or a test of faith, or is it possibly both? Commentators have suggested various solutions as to who Jacob actually wrestled with. Some say the man is Jacob's greatest fear and rival. His brother come to him, disguised in the dark, for vengeance. Others have suggested that it is Jacob's own inner demons that have come calling. In verse 31, however, Jacob identifies the stranger to be none other than Yahweh. As we look to Jacob in this scene, Jacob fights openly and persistently to get what he most wants, a blessing. The character of Jacob and the character of God are both remarkably displayed in this passage. God does not punish Jacob's conflict of character, but challenges it and reshapes it so that Jacob is able to live into his promised destiny as Israel, which according to verse 29 means one who strives with God and humans. Jacob's story is a much-needed reminder that in the life of faith there is no one model to which we must conform and submit. God entertains all kinds of characters and personalities, even those who appear to be unconventional or irreverent by our standards. Finally, the story also challenges any attempt to domesticate God and make the deity fit into some easy mold, whether that is the wrathful God or the God who meets my needs. Jacob came away from the encounter with unbounded blessings, but he also walked away limping, a man permanently marked. It attests to the complex reality of a God who is intimately engaged with humans, who seeks them out and blesses them. So let's take a look at a couple questions on this passage today. When you think of wrestling, and oftentimes especially when I think of wrestling, I think of the sport. And if we take a look at the sport of wrestling, it's a sport that requires close contact. I mean, you're in one another's face. You're bound together. You're almost like hugging each other, and you can't let go. You want to try and trip someone. It's a really close physical contact sport. So I find it interesting that God chooses to wrestle with Jacob. So what does wrestling with God look like to you? Oftentimes, it might look different. It looks different for everyone. But in the metaphor that we see here, what a wrestling match looked like with God through Jacob, it was a wrestle. It was in your face, heavy breathing, going at it, and just really intense. So have you ever wrestled with God? And what has it looked like for you? And how has God molded and shaped you through the wrestle? What are times in your life when you've come to a crossroads and you're not sure what to do and you wrestle with it? How has God worked through that and molded and shaped you through that? And how has your character changed? How have you changed through that wrestle? One of the reasons why this is such a symbolic story in the Jewish faith is because of how God intertwines with our lives, and God is constantly searching us, seeking us to change and mold us, to transform us. And unless we're willing to jump into the fire and dance, unless we're willing to jump into that wrestle, how can we be open to being molded and shaped? Well, I hope you have some time this week to think about how God has molded and shaped you through the wrestle. It may not look like Jacob's wrestling match, but God wrestles with us in all different kinds of ways. And in the wrestle, although it might be painful, we might come to realizations of things we didn't want to admit about ourselves, or even know about ourselves, or even have unveiled about ourselves. But in that wrestle, God is there, and God's presence is there, molding and shaping us into the person whom He wants us to be. Have a blessed week.